So we can agree that WordPress is vulnerable. Now, coming out of the package, WordPress isn't too bad. And we're going to explain further that the designers and the third-party plugin developers is where some of the security breaches are coming from. A recent investigation concluded that 73% of 40,000 most popular websites that use WordPress software are vulnerable to attack. And that's a fascinating number. That's pretty high. In June 2013, Checkmark's research lab ran multiple security scans against the source code of the most popular WordPress plugins. And the result, more than 20% of the 50 most popular WordPress plugins are vulnerable to common web attacks such as SQL injection. And so total 8 million vulnerable WordPress plugins were downloaded. Now, just so you know that the plugins are all designed by third-party developers. Unfortunately, within the third-party developers is where we're finding most of these security breaches. Now, you'd think that WordPress would scan them out, but you got to remember when you talk about SQL injection, some of this coding that they're injecting into the source code is so complex, it's not always that easy to find. So just remember, WordPress itself is rather secure. The real problem's now coming from a few other things that can directly affect WordPress, and we'll talk about that next. WordPress DOS attacks. Now, I think each of us has probably heard a little bit about DOS attacks. If you have not, it stands for denial of service. So in computing or denial of service attack, it is an attempt to make a machine or network resource unavailable to its intended users. The goal of a DOS attack is indefinitely interrupt or suspend services of a host connected to the internet or bring down an individual site. So the idea is not so much as this is just one way to hack into our sites, but it's just flooding traffic across the internet to our site or through our host and overload it over a period of time. There's so many hits that the hackers will send, and they're usually coming through what's called a bot. And there's thousands and thousands of them, and they hit the hosting service or our site directly, consecutively, trying to log in with bogus information. And what happens is they overload the resources on the network. And what happens then is if you're using what's called shared hosting, like through HostGator, they have to suspend your account because now you have went over your allocated bandwidth. And of course, now the hacker has gotten their way because now your site is not being delivered up, it's not working, or it's not visible, and now you cannot make the sales or carry on your blogging routine. They've accomplished what they set out to do. Now, this is just one of many, many ways to attack WordPress sites. Now, one other thing is we got to make sure that we always remember that WordPress security always starts on your local machine. Now, I have a few WordPress video tips series on this that can help you out if you have not watched those, that goes into great detail of how the malware on our local machine can actually have a keylogger, and the keylogger is another way that your login credentials and or other credentials can be captured without you knowing about it by a hacker. So I just want to bring that up briefly today. WordPress hackers. WordPress vulnerabilities. So we know the hackers will send bots to targeted sites, and they usually scan it for vulnerabilities. Once it locates one, then the hacker will infiltrate the site based on a particular vulnerability, whatever that might be. Now, one of the reasons you don't want the hackers to see your directories is so they cannot identify what you have installed for protection, and also they cannot identify vulnerabilities in order to attack your site, for instance, an outdated WordPress installation. And we'll talk about more tips as we go forward in this presentation today that's going to assist you, a WordPress user, in protecting yourself from these attacks.